Hey, Stoney here. Welcome to an episode of Mecha Academy, where we analyze games from fans to become better at Mechabellum. If you have a game that you can't figure out, make sure to submit them to the Discord channel tagging Stoney. This is a 800 MMR game, and the theme of today's video will be focused on chaff. So for every round, I'll be looking at the board and I'll try to answer these three questions from each side. Question number one, is there enough chaff? Question number two, is that the right type of chaff? And question number three, is there enough chaff clear? Now, for those of you who are new to Mechabellum, what is a chaff? A chaff is a word that we use in this game to describe cannon fodders. So in this game, you have all these different kinds of units. Now, some of these units are exceptionally better at dealing damage to your opponents, while some units can only deal enough damage in the right situations. And then there are some units whose only job is really just to take shots from your opponents, right? Cannon fodders. So these are the units that we call chaff. On the board here, you'll see these tiny little crawlies. These we call the crawlers. These are a type, one of the three chaffs in the game. So the three chaff being the crawlers, the fangs, and sometimes the wasp, which are these little flying machines. All right, so let's take a look at the board. Now, being an 800 MMR, I think the players at this point would have already experimented with a few things like unit counters. They've already also watched enough games to learn about the importance of chaff. So let's start with the bottom player, Zork, who's currently playing as a giant specialist. Right off the bat, you'll notice that the number of chaff is slightly lacking. So a good rule of thumb is that you should have at least one chaff for every carry unit that you run. A carry units are these sledgehammers who are primarily dealing damage. These marksmen can also count as carry units. So on this board, at the very least, I would love to see one per every sledgehammer here, if not more, right? If you watch a lot of high-level games, and I'm talking about 1800 MMR or up, you notice this trend where the majority of the battles are decided by who wins the chaff war first. Because at later stages, if you have units like the melting point or even like fortress, these units aren't particularly great at dealing with the chaff. Which means if you still have chaff left over on your board and your opponent doesn't, then you'll be wasting your opponent's time killing off these chaff while you're shooting at their melting points and their fortresses. Okay? All right, so quick look at the board here. Still very few chaff. So what will end up happening is that once these crawlers are depleted, the opponent's scorpions, the opponent's damage dealers like these sledgehammers will have a time shooting at the sledgehammers or shooting at the Vulcans, right? Now let's take a look at the board on the red player side, Hot Cloud. On his board, he has a little bit of a different issue. So, first of all, he does not lack any chaff, which is great. He has more than one squad of crawlers per his own damage dealer, which means these crawlers are going to come in and they're going to tank a ton of damage. He also sets up his chaff in a way that the chaff don't all just arrive at the same time. They're a little staggered, right? So if you're looking at this board, this chaff right here in the middle is going to come in first. And then these ones on the side are going to come in. And then the flanking chaff are going to come in. And once those are done, these guys are going to come in. So it's very nice to have a board set up this way because that means throughout the entire battle, you always have some sort of chaff running in front of your carry units, distracting the opponent's unit, right? So that's a very great use of chaff. Now, what I do want to comment on with this player is the chaff choice. Crawlers are excellent at tanking, and they're also great at dealing damage. However, they're very fast. So what that means is they're very terrible when they're running towards the opponents, especially the heavy anti-chaff units like Vulcan, right? So as you can see right now, it is like super slow-mo. The Vulcan is having a great time with only 95 meters of range destroying these crawlers because it doesn't need to move. The crawlers are coming to it. Now imagine if some of these crawlers are fangs. Imagine these back two squads of crawlers are fangs. They walk a little bit slower, right? They take a long time to arrive to the battlefield. But when they do, it forces the opponent to actually move forward before destroying it. So that would be a little better, right? To add some variety to your chaff line. Otherwise, you're at the risk of getting pretty hard counter here. Okay. All right. However, right, despite the fact that we have two specialized giants for anti-chaff, right, you notice that until the very last second, these units were still shooting at the chaff, especially these marksmen. They've been shooting at crawlers for ages. Right. So if the red player has enough chaff clear or slightly better chaff clear, it has a pretty good chance of getting rid of blue's board and allowing these scorpions to actually deal damage to these damage dealer. And they do a ton of damage, right? Just watch this scorpion. It's going to land a shot on these tanks, and a bunch of tanks are just going to go down. Same thing with this one, right? It's going to land a shot, boom. A whole lot of tanks is going to go down. Now imagine if these shots would have come a little bit sooner, right? And in order for that to happen, you have to balance two things. One is to get more chaff to distract your opponent. And of course, you want to get the right type of chaff, not the ones that are directly being countered by your opponent. And then the other thing is to get chaff clear yourself. So if I were the blue player down here, what should I do? Well, most of these units are fighting in a line here. So what I love to do is to have chaff that also go with the army. He already has two squads of crawlers, which is fantastic. But what I love to see are chaffs, for example, in the form of fangs, that are standing in front of these Vulcans. Vulcans can scale pretty well, especially once you get them range as well as scorching fire. They can do a lot of damage, not just your chaff, but medium-sized units. And the crawlers will stand in front of the Vulcan, not running forward and getting taken out by everything else, protecting the Vulcan from damage. Okay. All right. So we're looking at the player here on the red side. Red notice. Well, red didn't see these wasps. These are brand new wasps. But you notice that how the moment the chaff clears, there's going to be a ton of huge damage coming to these two scorpions. But the problem right now is red's only chaff clear are these two sledgehammers, which aren't doing nearly enough. Sledgehammers are great when you're having sort of a one-on-one battle, maybe like one sledgehammer versus a crawler. It will eventually kill it, but they're not built specifically for chaff clear. They're sort of the mediocre chaff clear, right? What red player really needs right now, really, because you have crawlers sort of running in a line, I think arc lights are going to be pretty good going against these crawlers running a line. The wasp, they do provide a bit of an issue, especially now they're level 2. So when you see level 2 wasp, you can't treat them as chaff anymore. As you can see on the left hand side here, they're pretty they do a pretty respectable amount of damage, so you have to counter them properly. I see phoenixes here, not the greatest counter to wasp. I would much prefer things like anti-air wasp of your own, which is really good. If you get anti-air wasp, what you effectively have done is you tie up these marksmen, because then they will be shooting at your wasp while defending the wasp from your opponent, right? So it's just a matter of whether you have anti-air wasps. Phoenixes, they do shoot at the air, but they shoot very slowly. As you can see, they will continue to shoot at this squad of wasps all the way until this wasp is right in front of the phoenix. So it's not the greatest way to clear up this wasp, right? All right, so let's speed up a little bit. Let's talk a little bit more about chaff here and also chaff-clear. All right, now steel balls, believe it or not, can also serve the role as chaff. Especially when you're level 1 steel balls, you have this thing called mechanical division, and that essentially allows every dead steel ball to turn into 5 crawlers, which means when you have 4 steel balls in a squad, you can actually end up with 20 crawlers, and that's like a full squad of crawlers. So getting mechanical division actually gives you a lot of value for building up your chaff. Right now, these steel balls are actually doing a pretty respectable job of just holding off the Vulcan. No, so the reason that last round actually worked pretty well is because the steel balls were holding up the Vulcan, allowing these crawlers to advance a little bit further. Therefore, the crawlers can actually do damage while serving as chaff, tanking from these sledgehammers and these marksmen and of course these wasps. So this is a pretty good combination. Now, the steel balls, energy absorption, questionable, but if you can actually get onto one of these units, very good tech. Armor against a Vulcan is very good because Vulcan, they don't usually do a lot of damage. They fire very fast, but they don't do a lot of damage, right? So I'm really liking the Red's board now. He took the anti-air wasp, which is an excellent chaff-clear, well, I guess a counter towards the opponent's wasp, even though you might have to go for an extra squad here because of the level 3 wasp. But it should do decent damage against his units. And it can also answer these overlords as well. As you can see right now, these overlords are absolutely getting hammered by these wasps and these phoenixes. And these wasps, after they're done, as you can see in just a second, probably not this turn because there's still a lot of crawlers on the ground here. But if they're done, as you see right now, they're drawing fire from these marksmen, which means the marksmen aren't shooting at sledgehammers and they aren't shooting at scorpions, allowing the board from the red player to win this round. And yes, you may argue, okay, what about it's just a counter, right? It's got the scorpion, it's got better units. But the core of this conflict here is who gets the chaff first. If the red player, let's say, in this case with a couple typhoons, we're just going to clear out these chaff wasps very quickly, allowing them to get to the larger units. This is going to be a very different round, right? Right now, there's no answer to the steel balls just yet, but if red decides to take on Scorching Flames, level 2 Vulcan with Scorching Flames kills a steel ball in under 3 seconds, I think. And because it has a splash of like 15 meters, it's going to kill 2 steel balls in 3 seconds, a squad of steel balls in 6 seconds. Right, so it's a very potent chaff clear, and not to mention it's just going to kill crawlers even faster. Now we get triple Stormcallers here. Stormcallers themselves can be used as a pretty decent chaff clear when you face your opponent that uses a lot of slow-moving fangs. Right, fangs are more difficult to kill than crawlers in certain situations because they have this technology called shield, which most players run. Stormcaller is an excellent way of getting to them. But right now, it seems like the Stormcaller is more as a utility unit and less so as a chaff clear. Alright, so never mind the large units. Watch out for the chaff. Watch out for the units that are just sent in there to die, right? Not there to shoot. And pay close attention to who has more of those units at the end of the game. Right? So it seems like with the addition of these typhoons, the energy absorption is actually doing great. With the addition of typhoons, we're seeing less and less wasps, but they're not clearing them fast enough. And once the wasp clears, then the real damage units can start dishing out those sweet plasma balls right here, right? So we got 2 level 2 marksmen. It's gonna get 1 shot, 2 shot. So if you're the blue player, And if you look at this, you'd be like, okay, what can I do better? Now, never mind like the unit decisions with the War Factory, which I thought was a little questionable, especially with so many steel balls with energy absorption. It's a very risky move. And also the fact that you got range and you're putting it in front of everybody else. Kind of questionable. But let's take a look at the chaff-clear on both sides. So chaff-clear on both sides at the bottom consists of Typhoons, Vulcans, and these sledgehammers. And then at the top, we have chaff-clear in the form of sledgehammers, a bit of wasp, and also the stormcrawlers. Right. Scorpions definitely contribute to chaff-clear, but I wouldn't necessarily call them chaff-clear. Now let's look at the chaff units. At the bottom, it has 4 squads of crawlers, 2 squads of wasps. At the top, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 7 squads of crawlers. Now, don't forget the steel balls, because each one of them will spawn a full squad of crawlers. So we have 7 squads of crawlers, 5 squads of steel balls, plus 5 more squads of crawlers, plus 3 squads of wasps. So just from a chaff perspective, I think the Reds board is a little bit stronger. Now, they don't have dedicated chaff clearing units like the Typhoons or Vulcan, but it seems like their units might stay in the game just a little bit longer. Okay, so let's see what will be the outcome of this. And again, I want you to pay close attention at whose chaff unit actually dies first. Alright, the frontline chaff is being taken care of. The weakness from the Reds board is showing through, but the weakness that is just a not very powerful chaff clear in the form of just 2 sledgehammers. However, once the chaff is cleared, we still have wasps from the Reds board, and that's drawing a lot of firepower from this marksman, allowing the carry units, which is the scorpions, to fire at these marksmen. And with that, he was able to win the round. Right, so stick around. We're going to jump right into game number 2. Alright, welcome to game 2 of episode 2 of Mecha Academy. So in this episode, we'll primarily focus on the situation with chaff. We're going to ask ourselves 3 questions. Is there enough chaff? Is that the right type of chaff? And is there enough chaff clear? Because I firmly believe as you're advancing towards higher MMRs, most of your battles, if not all of your battles, are decided by who wins the chaff fight first, right? And it's pretty straightforward. If you win the chaff fight, that means your units can then shoot at their damage dealers a lot sooner and killing them before they can do the damage to you, right? It's a no-brainer. So let's jump in. So round 1, the blue player here has no chaff. And if he decided to add, I think he started with Stormcrawler's arc lights, and he decided to add 2 units of marksman. You can do that for the first round, especially if you're confident that your chaff clear is going to get rid of the chaff before the enemy gets rid of your chaff clear. Now, in this case, I don't think that's gonna happen, because as you can see right now, the chaff clear gets immediately taken down by these phoenixes, and because he has 0 chaff, that the phoenixes and the marksmen just continuing on rampaging the army. All right, round 2. Let's take a look at the board. All right, this turn, let's look at the top player, the red player's position. So this game, I think this is a 800 MMR game. I believe, yeah, this is an 800 MMR game. And this is a very good way to place your crawlers. So these crawlers are placed just 2 squares behind the tower, while you have your first line of carry units, I guess. Well, chaff clear technically can also count as carry units, because they're the ones that are stealing the damage. Just a little bit ahead of the tower. So what this will allow the board or the players to do is that by the time these crawlers arrive, maybe let's say at this line here, these arc lights arrive this line here, the crawler would have already been in front of it, right? So this is a very good, so you can see here, right? So arc light is going to walk up to like this line here, and then the crawler is just going to run ahead of it. In fact, it's actually going to run ahead of it just a little before that. But what it's going to help them with is it's going to help draw fire, right, from the opponent's board, and allowing this Arclight to survive a little bit longer. Now, this one unfortunately was shut down by these Stormcallers. Um, Stormcallers are a little bit tricky when you want to distract them using crawlers. Normally, the rule of thumb for me is I try not to put my chaff and my dealer in a straight line if they're all running into a Stormcaller. So I like to have like chaff a little bit on the side of. So when they're running into Stormcallers, even if they get ahead, the missiles will land in that general area, not where your unit's going to be. Alright, let's look at the bottom. So last game, the blue player did add some chaff here, and he, as you can see, with the additional chaff, he was able to do a little bit better. I think he still failed in the end due to the lack of anti-air to shoot down his phoenixes, but he had a squad of Stormcallers, and he had chaff left over. Right? Fire was offered, and it was taken. So that's a tool to reduce the amount of chaff on one's board. Very strange anti-air marksman right now. I think it's just wanting to answer these phoenixes a little bit faster because they do grant you a 30% range boost. However, he's going to have a bad time with his wasp coming in from behind. He continues to add on a few more carry units, which I would say that's probably okay with these additional marksmen because you did lose last game to these phoenixes. And with all things being equal, if you have marksmen with anti-air technology left against the phoenixes, there's a pretty decent chance that you'll win. Alright, so win this round, I think it's pretty straightforward. It all just comes down to this wasp and how quickly they can get to the tower. If they can get to the tower quickly, then it's a game for red, but if it cannot, it could be a game for blue. Okay, let's move on to round number 4. Now, one thing to notice is that as the game evolves, you'll have more opportunities to use your chaff to plug the holes, right? In the last round, you notice that the reason that this marksman and this phoenix started gang up on this cluster of units, it was because there was nothing except these crawlers. Once these crawlers ran too far forward, there's no more chaff to kind of deal that tank that damage, right? 2 squads of Mustangs are added from the unit drop. I think Mustangs are a pretty decent unit because not only they serve as a form of chaff-clear, but once they've done the damage, they have enough unit models per squad that they can actually tank quite a bit from like these phoenixes or even these marksmen. However, he is up against a level 6 Sabertooth, so I don't think there are currently enough sniper or marksmen here. Maybe there are 6 of them, but they don't have range, which means you're going to need a lot more chaff to keep these Sabertooth occupied. Wasp are added here. So Wasp on the flanks here. They are going to pull part of these Mustangs, which I think are more than enough to deal with the Wasps. I would love to see 2 squads of Fangs, maybe even behind the tower. Because if we have Fangs behind the tower, what will happen is these crawlers are going to run forward, but the Fangs will run forward a lot slower. So once the crawlers die, the Fangs will actually be in front of the crawlers, therefore tanking this damage. Look at this, look at this Sabertooth, right? Right now with no chaff in front of it, or very few chaff in front of it, it's just doing so much damage. It's one-shotting every single unit here, right? And the same goes with these units here. Without chaff, it's just doing so much damage. And this is where things start to change, because the Mustangs themselves are now serving as chaff. And you can see immediately the difference it makes when these large carry unit, the single shot, high damage units are shooting on the chaff. Subsidized Stonecaller, great car. I think both should pick it. However, I am still a firm believer that the blue player could benefit from a few squads of Fangs. I wouldn't even be surprised if he wants to put on crawlers and just have them really at the edge here as they arrive a little bit later. But I think ultimately, right, in the later stage of the game, you have to ask yourself, what sort of units do I want my chaff to tank the damage for? And will my chaff be the right kind of unit? In the later stage of the game, this unit right here, a Sabertooth, is going to need some protection. Crawlers tend to run up in a clump, and Sabertooth does take advantage of that. A vertical squad of Fangs would survive a bit longer, especially later on. You might want to consider adding shields onto this Fang, so they will survive quite a lot longer. So excellent job adding Fangs here, even though these Fangs are really serving as a deterrent for the Wasp, but they are going to arrive in the battlefield super late, and hopefully they can tank some of the shots once they get rid of these crawlers, of course. In the middle, we actually have a bit of a chaff-clear problem. The Arclight was actually taken out by one of these Sabertooth nice and early. Therefore, we have so many crawlers just kind of walking in here. Now, not going to be a problem right there in the middle. And once these Mustangs move up, now they're serving as tanks or chaff against these sledgehammers and against these marksmen. Even though they don't do a lot of damage, but what they're doing is allowing units that can do damage, namely these marksmen and stormcallers, to destroy that Sabertooth. Fire Badgers, excellent unit. I love Fire Badgers. I love them not because they are chaff clear, which most boards seems to have an insufficient amount of. I also love Fire Badgers, especially level 3, because they're so damn tanky and they're so flexible. Vulcan are kind of limited by this own turn rate, so they turn very slowly. Even though they're powerful, they shoot very far, but you can't get so many of them. Fire Badgers comes in squads of 3s. They can get range upgrades, which shoots just as far as a Vulcan, and they themselves can use as a chaff later on. So, yeah, I love Fire Badgers. Now, looking at the board here, there's going to be a little bit of a problem with the Vulcan, especially with Firebomb. On a board that has no chaff, the Firebomb is going to fire on the first squad of units within range, and that range is 180 meters. So that's like right here. That's how far the Vulcan is. All these Stormcrawlers needs to go is to walk up to this line, and it's going to get showered by the incendiary bombs. Once the Vulcan locks onto that, any chaff behind these units are going to suffer devastating damage. So these crawlers going to walk in and they're just going to get wiped out by the fire. These Fangs, they're going to survive a little longer. They're going to walk straight up, right? That's okay. However, by the time these Fangs arrive, the Sabertooth would have already gotten these units here. So it's not a very good thing. Alright, here comes down a fire. Luckily, actually, these crawlers narrowly dodged. I think they only killed just a few crawlers. So this is actually a very good position for our rev cover. Alright, so let's zoom in a little bit. So yeah, as you can see here, without chaff, the board just falls apart. So let's quick forward on this one. Now, if you're the blue player, what would you do in this instance? Okay. The anti-missile is okay. I think you might need to have a couple Mustangs further up to prevent the incendiary bomb. I think generally speaking, you need at least 1.5 Mustang per Vulcan with the missile interceptor to get all the missiles. Ideally, you want to have 2 per Vulcan, but that's a lot of Mustangs involved just for the missile interceptor. I'm very curious, Iron Being, I guess, yeah, you're going to get a bunch of units, but I would much prefer this cluster over this cluster. But, you know, each to their own. Oil is picked up, and also Incendiary is off cooldown for our blue player, which means he, once again, has a chance to get rid of one side of the chaff. Alright, so we got Fans, they're finally coming down. while I really like fans in the earlier rounds, I'm not a big as big of a fan for it right now because of the incendiary bomb. Right now, these fans, having two of them right here is a bit of a waste. If I were to put fans, I would put a single squad of fans right here in the center, and that's going to draw the fire from both Vulcans. And because you don't really have too many units that's currently walking through the center, you can have the middle lit up, and then you can protect the rest of your army on the side. Because right now, that fire still killed most of your crawlers as well as some of your fangs. So yeah, that wasn't... It was the right chaff to use. It just wasn't used correctly. You didn't need two of them. You just need one of them. Put that right in the middle where nobody goes through on your board to draw the fire. And I would love to see some Mustangs at the front, or level 1 Mustangs. Just cheap chaff that also serves a dual purpose of catching those missiles. Okay. Now, the red player is suffering from some of the problems of his own making. So yes, he's got crawlers. So this is a problem with the incorrect type of chaff. Crawlers are great, but they don't last that long, right? And they don't last that long because they run so fast. Even with the crawler that are at the very back line here, that crawler is going to run to the front line within 10 seconds, which means by the end of 10 seconds, you will have no chaff on your side of the board. The reason that red has been consistently losing for a couple rounds, despite the fact that he has great chaff clear and he has great carry units, is because at the end of the day, when the smoke clears and the Mustangs step up and become chaffs of their own, these Vulcans are being shot at by a line of marksmen with nothing in front of it to protect them, right? So I would love to see some late arriving fangs, because they can then come up forward and then they can tank the damage. But even then, you notice how this sledge Sabertooth died very fast, and this Sabertooth is about to die very fast. They don't have to die that early. They could certainly stay in for a lot longer if you have some chaff at this point. Okay? Alright, so it looks like the Phoenixes are being shot at, it's being taken care of, but these Vulcans should prevail and should bring home the victory for this round. Okay, excellent. Round 9. What's a great unit? Steel balls are actually not bad for both sides, but I think it works a little better for our blue player because now they can serve as a chaff themselves, as well as a layer of tank against these Vulcans. I still will very much love to see some units up front. Instead of having fans, I would love to see some crawlers, because crawlers actually move forward a little bit. I'm not entirely sure that it's going to draw aggro from both of these Vulcans, because you already have the fans pretty far up. So chances are they're going to fire these fans. Okay, so interesting placement on the steel balls. They're kind of on the side in a vertical format. I guess what they wanted to avoid is just maybe too much splash damage. I'm not sure. High level Rhino was picked up. Rhino is really good, and they do a lot of tanking with 200,000 damage. I am mostly worried about the Sabertooth though. If you look at the Sabertooth, this Sabertooth did 0 damage last turn. And the reason it did 0 damage is because it got locked on by this high-level marksman that's kind of hiding behind this tower right here. And if you want the Sabertooth to actually do some damage, you need to provide it with protection. And right now, there is no protection. Finally, the forward Mustangs that I was hoping for, that is going to stop all the missiles from these Vulcans. So very nicely played by our blue player. Building up an extremely well-rounded board, whereas our red player is kind of stuck on just spamming Phoenixes. There's no use of spamming Phoenixes if your chaff clear gets locked on, if your chaff clear gets killed, because your Phoenixes won't actually do much. And to make matters worse, your opponent has anti-air marksman with range, which means this marksman, when aiming at phoenixes, is now effectively shooting at 225 meters. He doesn't even need to move to shoot your phoenix, and it's doing 75% more damage to your unit. So maybe not the greatest time to mass phoenixes. I would love to see some stormcallers coming in from the red side. Definitely not phoenixes, and I think this is game. All right, so I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you learned a thing or two about chaff-clear, and the evolving relationship between the two. And if you like this video, please give it a like and subscribe to my channel. And also, please drop your replay in the official Mechabellum Discord, because I love to take a look at yours. I'm trying to make as many of these Mecha Academy videos as possible on top of my regular uploads, so that new players will get a chance to reflect on what they're doing wrong, and hopefully doing less of those wrong things in the future. All right, thank you very much, and I'll see you on the next one.
Prepare your tactics, Mechabellum's calling. Deploy your fortress, the battlefield's alive with swarms.